Hello, Michael Grasso with Private Pook Games, here today with a 6-month update for Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era. About 6 months ago, back in January 2025, I called this game a well-stocked deli. And I still maintain that that's kind of what this game is as a metaphor. But I did mention in my review that I really wanted to see where I was with this game 6 months from now, because it's one of those games that was advertised as being very replayable. Too long didn't read. I'm going to agree with that statement today. I'm going to have some things that I do, like a few things here and there that I'm going to say, well, would love to see in expansions them work with some of these additional things that get a little repetitive from time to time. But in general, I'm here 6 months later to say that I still table the game from time to time, and it really is still one of the best things that Chip Theory Games has put out. I think the only game that stands ahead of it for me, and this is just me personally, is Cloudspire, because that game I find very unique and I just love playing it. Super excited about the new Kickstarter for that one being delivered. But at the end of the day, I think that this game, Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era, is going to end up being a lot of people's favorite Chip Theory game, and for good reason. So let's talk about it today. So going back again, I called it a well-stocked sandwich deli. I'm not going to go into that too much today. I know I leaned to that pretty hard back in January. But I do want to talk about ways in which the game has held up. I'm still playing it 6 months from now. I'm not playing it every day. I play like 1 or 2 games every time I set it up, which is, I can't remember, anywhere from like once a month to once every 2 or 3 weeks. The character creation remains awesome. And my favorite thing about it is that it's pretty easy. My second favorite thing about it is that I can actually do it kind of randomly, and it's just as fun if I pick which ones I want. Essentially, it starts with picking a race and picking a class. That is pretty standard in a lot of games, but what I like about this one is that it's very easy to, at a quick glance, see exactly what each one means. Yes, you're not going to be able to memorize like every tenacity skill, but you'll be able to see what the core ability that's unique to that race is, and you'll be able to get a general idea of what it is. With the last game I played, which I lost in session 3, I got to, I think, day 3 of session 3, and then I lost, unfortunately. I was playing I'm going to say this wrong because it's been a while since I've played any Elder Scrolls video game. Of Brayton, whatever. And I was playing a Nightblade. And the reason I chose these two is I didn't choose them. I picked them randomly. And I've actually found that as I've gotten more comfortable with the game, randomly drawing one and just rolling with it has been really fun for me. That's not going to be the right one for everyone, but I do think randomly drawing them is really fun, and that says a lot to how easy this is. So that's just excellent. Like, just being able to pick one of each, and you're already sort of getting started. And yeah, that's not every piece of the setup, but it is the core thing you start with. Now, and also, what I've also found is when I first began the game, I wasn't really focusing on achieving the master level of my class. Lately, I have been doing that, and there is something very advantageous to it. You're not going to achieve master level every time you play through the game. It does make you work for it. Every class has this specific thing you need to do, but when you do achieve it, it unlocks some very cool skills, some very excellent things. For Nightblade in particular, it added on some healing options that were really helpful, and part of why I did not die in session 2. The one thing I will say, now that I'm talking about character creation, is you do get a combat skill line. Everyone gets a combat skill line because everyone can punch someone in the face or shoot someone with an arrow. Every character can. You do pick one other skill line, and I am really hoping that with the upcoming expansions, that Chip Theory Games adds a few more combat-focused skill lines. I picked one-handed shield for this character, and I feel like every time I make a character with this, I have so many different options with race and class that make all these different combos. And as much as there are a ton of skill lines you can choose from, there's a few of them that I'm always choosing because those are the ones that cause damage. And there's only so much you can do in this adventure if you can't hurt your opponent. And combat alone, there are ways to combo this with other non-combat related skill lines, but I don't usually find those quite as satisfying for me personally. If you have certain combos you found that work, I'd love for you to share those in the comments. I think that just helps people enjoy the game, including myself. But I have found that, there's certain ones like one-handed shield, two-handed bow. I can't remember the exact names of them. Oh, I got them right here. What am I saying? Destruction staff. These sort of things, Daedric summoning to an extent. These are all ones that focus on a little more on damage dealing, and I feel like if you don't pick one of those, your options are so limited to actually hurt your foes. And so it kind of makes it so the other ones that aren't damage dealing are more complementary skills. And that means I choose some of the same skill lines way too often. That is not the case with class or race. Those I feel like are much more fluid. I'm not locked into any particular combination, but I do feel like I'm locked into certain combinations with the skill lines. So not a huge con by any means, but just something I'm hoping is addressed in expansions, Chip Theory games. What else? Encounters. I originally was a little nervous that encounters were going to start to feel kind of samey. I'm happy to say that is not the case. Encounters feel unique. You have more control over them than you had in other Chip Theory games like Too Many Bones and other things. The encounters, this includes even, Hoplomachus Victorum. You get to, one, they're very unique. You have certain ones that are specific to the region you've chosen. For instance, I just played Morrowind. There are certain encounters I'm only going to have in Morrowind, but also I just love the fact that you don't just make one deck. You pick what kind of encounter you have each time. Are you going to a town? Then you'll have a town encounter. Are you going to a peaceful landmark? You're going to have a peaceful encounter. Are you going to a combat area? You're going to have a combat encounter or aggression. I can't remember what word they use. And then there's even ones that are unstable, where you really have no idea what you're going to have, but you get a bonus of tenacity for that. That is a humongous step up over some of Chip Theory's previous systems, just being able to have control over what your encounter is. Sometimes they still can become repetitive, but it's not anywhere near as much as I feared 6 months ago. The biggest issue I've had is I've had a couple quests that focus on delves, and that's led to me having like 3 delve quests in a row, and that can feel a little samey, but that's a small concern. That's just something that does pop up from time to time, but it's not something that's really diminished my enjoyment of the game very much. I will say, when it comes to delves, survey versus uncover, there's 2 types of goals: to survey during a delve and uncover during a delve. They are so similar. They are different, but they're so similar that I have seen discussion, people wondering, why are there 2 different ones? And I think the reason why is it helps with balance, and it helps to change up, how you approach the delve. One of them, you have to retreat in order to win. The other, you just have to find the 3 sky shards. One of them, you get experience for sky shards even if you don't succeed. One of them, you don't. Those seem kind of superfluous to me, but yet again, it doesn't really diminish things too much. Another thing I was worried would be very repetitive was enemies. You mostly have the same enemies in your bag, regardless of what quest you choose, regardless of what, of what map you're on. They don't feel repetitive to me. Yes, you do see some of the same ones, but you see them in such different and unique scenarios that they don't feel that similar, and there will be things in the encounters that sometimes change that up too, both how they interact, how they might fight against you, and that to me doesn't feel too repetitive. Also, specific quest monsters, there's a good number of them. This is just some of them right here. Depending on your quest, you might have specific quest monsters that pop in as a boss, or that might come in here and there based on your fight. You might have a specific one that pops in based on a quest or a side quest you've done. That changes things up quite a bit and makes the monsters not feel as repetitive as I initially feared. 4 unique monsters only for each region. I was originally kind of skeptical of that. So if I choose Skyrim, if I do a quest in Skyrim, There are only 4 monsters unique to Skyrim, and the rest of them are the same monsters I face everywhere. I was a bit skeptical of that, but it's largely gone unnoticed. I don't really notice a difference with that. You can take that as a pro or a con. I didn't notice, therefore it's not unique to each area, or I didn't notice, as in it wasn't a problem. I consider that a pro. To me, everything felt unique enough that it did not cause an issue. And this is, like I said, 6 months later, this is showing some promise. It's cooldown. I cannot begin to tell you how well the cooldown system works. It's just, it really, this is one that I was not skeptical of in the beginning, but it's only gotten better. In terms of the way, different statuses and things work, in Hoplomachus Victorum, it was a little more based on tactics. In Too Many Bones, it was just the status applied to your character. Some of those which you couldn't get rid of unless you had a specific skill. This is just a better way to handle that. It still makes it where statuses are a big problem or a big help, but they're harder to exploit to your advantage and cheese the game. You're also less likely to get something like, for instance, a bleed status. I can't remember, what do they call it? They have a different name for it in this game. Where'd I put my sheets? Here it is. Yes, in this one they don't call it bleed. They call it bane. That bleed is pretty much a death sentence in Too Many Bones. In this one, it's just really not good, but there are ways you can deal with it, and it also does eventually cycle out of your cooldown track, whereas in Too Many Bones, if you get hit with bleed, you pretty much just bleed to death if you don't fight the characters or defeat them quickly. At least for the most part. There's a few exceptions, but generally speaking. So cooldown is just really, really excellent. I also gotta say, using a skill and not having it taken away from you for the whole combat is so much more satisfying, and there's so much more strategy you can have with it. So I love that as well. Just knowing that I can use a skill and I don't have to wait on using it all the time because I only get one shot at it is very cool. It does mean I might not get it back for a little bit, but I have some control over how to manipulate that in strategic ways as well. The backpack. This is one I didn't have positive or negative opinions on initially. It was just something that I was learning about. Having the backpack is such a huge bonus. It's not just about being able to carry more items. It's about being able to strategize with which ones I put in my ready slots and which ones I keep in my backpack. Because part of what's really cool about this is there are strategies, there are skills, there are certain items that are going to utilize your ability to pull things out of your backpack. Discard something or overtax it and then put a new one in. There's so many different cool ways to do that. So what you choose to put in your ready slot is not just what you want to use, but it's what makes sense for this fight versus what you might want to save for later. There's so many things that are cool there. Tenacity. I love the way tenacity works in this. Mechanically, it's so similar to other chip theory games, but the tenacity skills are so useful. I'm just constantly looking and scanning my different tenacity abilities, both the ones that are with my class and the ones that you get some that are on your cards. There are cards that I'm specifically putting, items that I'm specifically putting in my ready slots because the tenacity skills are so good. And it's just one of those things where it makes rolling a miss so much less frustrating, even better than in previous. I mean, things like the backup plan in previous chip theory games were good as it was. It has been drastically improved in tenacity. They're just so useful and so many different options. What else? The game, exploiting the game. One of the things I've heard from time to time is that there are certain games with chip theory that people will argue, well, you can exploit this a little too much. I have lots of thoughts about that. I'm going to try and not spend 3 hours explaining them, but I'm going to first say that in Elder Scrolls, it's not impossible to exploit the system, but it is much harder than in some of their other games where that may be considered by others to be an issue. It's never really been an issue for me, but for some it is. I understand it. That's totally valid. It is much harder to exploit in this system. It is also much harder for you to end up in a combat likewise where the enemies can just steamroll you. The first time I played Too Many Bones, I literally set up the first encounter and I was dead within a round, and there is no way that couldn't have happened, because sometimes, because the game is so varied and there's so many different combinations of enemies and circumstances, I literally was presented with an unwinnable fight my first game. I almost decided, forget this, I'm selling it. Thankfully I didn't. That is much less common in Elder Scrolls. It does happen. And sometimes it's because you haven't figured out the clear way out of it yet. But sometimes it's just because you've been given a fight and then it says add a level 2 creature with a horrible, horrible skill that your class is not prepared to encounter. It does happen, but it's far less often. So I look at that as a small little hiccup that I'm willing to overlook because so much of this works better. And then likewise, the game is not as exploitable. There are certain skills that you can combo and combine together and do devastating damage, but it doesn't, to me, feel like an exploit. And I would argue that there's exploiting a game and breaking it or cheesing it, and then there's using good tactics. And the only real difference between exploiting and using good tactics or strategy is, do you feel satisfied when you do it? When you exploit a game, generally it feels like you've cheesed it, and so you don't feel satisfied by figuring that out. When you feel satisfied by doing it, you suddenly don't call it exploiting or cheesing the game. You call it good strategy, good tactics. I'm playing the game well. So I think there's a very fine line between those two, and that's the only difference between them, is do you feel satisfied by figuring it out? I feel satisfied when I come up with a good combination in this game that just decimates a character. And it feels satisfying. So I would say in this one, this is not a game that's exploitable or cheesable. It's a game that presents you with many options to destroy an opponent who might at first glance seem insurmountable, and that is a win for me. Last few things I wanted to mention. I've made references to Too Many Bones and Hoplomachus Victorum while talking about this game 6 months later. I honestly haven't felt the need to table those two games since I've started taking this on. Now, that doesn't mean that those games have been invalidated. It doesn't mean that they need to go. I considered selling that. I was going to put them up for sale for Gen Con next week. I have not done it yet. And part of that's because the games are unique and different. Another part of it is I have lots of good memories. So I don't want to get rid of those games yet. Maybe I will at someday, but right now I'm not ready to. That said, I do think it is a positive statement for this game that it's taken some of the systems with those games, incorporated them in, just used strands of the DNA and made a very different, very distinct game that improves on so many of those systems. And I don't feel like there are any systems in those games that they took and made worse. They have improved all of them. And then the last thing I'm going to say about this game, guys, there's a lot out there about how this game is daunting to learn. I'm going to argue that if you have played games with any sort of complexity at all, I would highly encourage you to go into this game thinking it's not going to be as daunting as you think. Maybe that's just because I played a lot of complex stuff, but I think it has more to do with the fact that the way this game flows, despite having a lot of rule sets for a lot of different aspects, it flows really well, and the rule book's organized well, and the Dized App, the tutorial in the Dized App, is got to be one of the best digital tutorials I have ever used. The tutorial booklet is it's okay. It's not the way I learned. I paged through it a little bit. The Dized App is the way to do it, but if you do that, this game is really not as daunting as people might have said, in my humble opinion. So, 6 months later, Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era still makes it to my table at least once a month, sometimes a little more often. This is a really, really great game. I think this is going to stand as a lot of people's favorite Chip Theory Games game. It is my second favorite only because I'm a total dork for Cloudspire. I can't help it. Sorry. I know Cloudspire's not for everyone, and that's okay. Different games for different folks. But this still remains very, very, very excellent. I guess if I hate putting numbers on games, but I guess if I had to, I would consider this one 9 to 9.5. If you want me to give it a 10, okay, say I gave it a 10. I think the only reason I wouldn't give it a 10 is from some of those small things that are there, but at the end of the day, no game is perfect, and I think this game is a 10 of a 10 for a lot of different people. If you have been looking for the ultimate chip theory game styled dungeon crawler, this is the game for you. And I'm happy to say that that's still pretty good. Please share your thoughts if you have if your thoughts have evolved about this game in the it's been more than 6 months, but it's been 6 months since I received my Kickstarter. In the months since this game has appeared, if your thoughts have evolved, please share. Be a kind person is all I ask, but you can share positive thoughts about the game. You can share negative thoughts. That sounds good to me. And thank you so much. Please subscribe. Give me a like. Hit that thumbs up button to give me a like, and have yourself a great day.